We all know the model where an OEM sends a spec list down to a tier 1 who deals with whatever tier 2's fancy. That model is over. And the players who haven't internalized that yet are already behind.
The car has become very different. This is digital, it's data-driven, it's software-driven, software-defined, AI-defined. This is happening already.
The Chinese automotive industry is absolutely on fire. And they are moving at a speed that is unheard of.
Satellite communication are now being much more affordable. Using NTN has two preconditions from the vehicle manufacturers. One on complementarity. As long as the vehicle remains on a region where terrestrial network is available, the vehicle manufacturers are now getting into the situation where no connectivity is not an option.
On this particular Auto 1, you can actually press the SOS button and it will make the call to be through a satellite connection as opposed to a cellular connection.
Think of it as a large orchestration system. So if they register that up with a system like MuleSoft Fabric, anybody that's connected to that MuleSoft Fabric has an unfair advantage over anybody else that isn't connected to that.
This is the MWC 2026 special. Every year, Mobile World Congress brings over 100,000 people to Barcelona. Telco executives, silicon vendors, software companies, automotive tier 1s, media, and more, all walking through the multiple halls, trying to figure out who's going to work with whom and on what. In 2026, from an automotive standpoint, a couple of shifts were everywhere if you were paying attention. Two stories kept coming back in every conversation I had. The first, satellite connectivity for cars went from a slide in the deck to actual products on actual booths. BMW showed a roadmap. Harman showed a working demo. MediaTek shipped a chipset. Non-terrestrial networks, NTN for short, stopped being a buzzword. The second, the way this industry collaborates has fundamentally changed. We all know the model where an OEM sends a spec list down to a tier 1 who deals with whatever tier 2's fancy. That model is over. And the players who haven't internalized that yet are already behind. Behind every dashboard, every ADAS feature, every HMI, every EV battery lies a human story. I'm Stéphane Lagrelle, and this is Automotive Storytelling, brought to you by the Storytelling Tribe, a podcast where we uncover the narratives that drive automotive innovation. At the PwC booth, BMW was invited to share their views on the future of connectivity. Before that, Taniev Shat, who is a partner at Strategy and PwC Strategy consulting arm, and leads their semiconductor practice across Europe, shared a few very interesting slides, especially about the new dynamics happening in the industry. And I couldn't resist asking him for a longer conversation. One of the big topics that we have seen happening in the last decade is how the whole ecosystem of automotive is changing, right? From a very traditional mechanics where the OEMs were asking tier 1s to build boxes and then the box were coming back to the tier 1s. Now we see all those tech companies playing in. We see the silicon vendors having more importance and so on. Recently, you have been creating a study where you were thinking about different scenarios on how you would see this ecosystem evolving into the years. Can you explain to us a little bit how do you see this happening in the different scenarios you have been studying?
Sure. The car, of course, has become very different to what we've seen in the past. So it's not an isolated machine. This is digital, it's data-driven, it's software-driven. So it's a complete new architecture. But still, nobody talks about this really anymore. So if you just look what happened at CES in Las Vegas, or look around here at the MWC, so this is now reality. Yeah. So it's software defined, it's AI defined. So this is happening already.
That observation that nobody talks about the software defined vehicle anymore because it is simply the vehicle is completely aligned with everything I heard in January during CES. The question has moved on. It's no longer about whether cars run on software. It's about who captures the value in a world where they do.
So of course, in a world where traditionally you had like OEMs and you had the tier 1s and the tier 2s, and there was a clear separation. The OEM said, okay, so we are defining the car, we are setting the basic architecture, and then for the development of the hardware and the software, you use tier ones, and you would use it for the material, for the components you need. So that's the world we come from, which is not existing anymore, right? It's a decomposition of hardware. It depends on each other, but it's separated topics. So new domains. It's still the same cake, but the slicing is different.
And one of the forces driving that reslicing, China. I spoke with Andrew Thiel, general manager of the secure platform division at Trustonic, and he'd been watching the Chinese automotive push with a particular eye.
If we take a look at what's happened in China, the Chinese automotive industry is absolutely on fire. I mean, here at Mobile World Congress, we're seeing, Xiaomi has some very, very impressive, hypercars on its stack, the BYDs, etc., very impressive vehicles. And they are moving at a speed that is unheard of. How are they achieving that? Well, they're learning from other industries. They're pulling talent from other software industries like the mobile industry. And that's allowing them to say to their partners, come with us on this journey.
That phrase, come with us on this journey, would turn out to be the unofficial motto of this entire MWC. But before we get deeper into how the industry is collaborating differently, I want to tell you the first of our two big stories, the one about connectivity from space. To understand how non-terrestrial networks became the talk of MWC this year for anyone in automotive tech, you need to understand the organization that's been quietly building the foundation. The 5G Automotive Association, 5GAA, brings together telco operators and their supply chain alongside vehicle manufacturers and tier ones. Maxime Flamand is the CTO and has been at the center of this convergence for years.
NTN. So could you maybe explain what NTN is for us?
NTN stands for non-terrestrial network. It's basically the idea of using the satellite communication that is already being launched for many years and now being much more affordable. Using NTN has two preconditions from the vehicle manufacturers. One on complementarity, as long as the vehicle remains on a region where terrestrial network is available, it uses the traditional network. But as soon as it steps out in a coverage gap, it can then seamlessly transition to the non-terrestrial network without any new setup to bring into the car. The second part is integration into the 5G standards, making sure that this does not require new types of chipsets, new types of radio access technologies.
So essentially what we are saying is it's pretty clear that the cellular network will never cover 100% of the broadband network because connectivity is a must not only for entertainment and safety services. We need to have satellites to fill the gaps.
It's a little bit more refined. There are some obligations from the mobile network operators to provide the coverage on given areas. Sometimes it's more affordable to provide this service using the non-terrestrial network than make more investments on the terrestrial network when the cells in which you deploy are very low demand except for cars passing by on a highway.
What fascinated me was how Maxime described the journey. This wasn't a pure technology breakthrough. It was a trust-building exercise.
Around 2020, 2021, we brought the vehicle manufacturers and then we bluntly asked, is there a future for satellite communication in your product perspective? The answer originally was relatively negative, not because of the technical complexity, rather because of the idea of an additional stakeholder getting into the ecosystem and the challenge with regards to getting deals that are affordable. But as many times we get this situation where gaps are occurring and then the vehicle manufacturers are now getting into the situation where no connectivity is not an option. They want to have this safety net. And that's what the non-terrestrial networks were offering.
So it was more a question of how are we going to collaborate as different parties in the industry as opposed to really how we're going to solve very complex technical problems.
It's the essence of an association like 5GA is bringing trust between the parties, educate each other, understanding each other, talking the same language. The technology is not always a challenging factor. The community is the one that really makes a difference.
So by the time I got to the Harman booth, I was looking at the theory turn into practice. Harman, which belongs to Samsung since 2017, had just announced a partnership with satellite company Viasat. And they were not just showing slides. They had a working demo in an actual vehicle. Firasat Siddiqui, Senior Director leading Harman's global portfolio PMO, walked me through it.
Connectivity is a backbone of in-vehicle cabin experiences. As we're sitting in this Auto One vehicle, we have a significant amount of features and products that on their own would not be functional if you do not have reliable connectivity and ubiquitous connectivity. As people are exploring outside of the environment in terms of going into remote regions, family trip through the mountains to, national parks, and you want to maintain that particular connections, especially when it comes to safety.
You have announced this partnership with Viasat. Why you are going into this direction?
What we're slowly doing when it comes to connectivity, starting off with the low end and just simply sending out the messages in a condition, because the packet sizes of the data transfer that takes place, A, is costly, and B, it takes a little bit of a while. However, as we're continuing to expand, now we're able to showcase a voice call enabled through those same protocols. Eventually, the customer will be able to have, whether it's 4G, 5G, and now SATCOM capability. On this particular Auto One, you can actually press the SOS button, and it will make the call to be through a satellite connection as opposed to a cellular connection.
And on the chipset side, the silicon that actually makes this work, MediaTek, was showing something equally concrete. Wei-Shi Yu is their VP of Automotive Product Marketing, and he had just come from announcing their latest 5G telematics chipset.
We have recently announced our latest 5G telematic chipset in the automotive environment, which enable the 3GPP standard-based Release 17 by software upgrade for the future Release 18. The downlink is from the sky to the car, so which you need some information, some video streaming, and also the uplink side, sending the data. Because the car is always connected car to home, car to infrastructure, you need to provide your vehicle data to another vehicle or for the service center.
So you have the standards bodies setting the framework, the chipset maker building the silicon, and the tier one integrated it into a product that BMW can put on the roadmap. For the first time, these pieces were all visible in the same building at the same show. Before we leave the NTN story, Maxime made one distinction that I think is worth highlighting because it changes how you think about future-proofing a car.
There was a keynote from BMW where the person from BMW was saying we need to make sure that 6G is backwards compatible to 5G because as OEMs, we cannot afford to change completely the life cycle of our vehicle.
We don't necessarily talk about backward compatibility. We talk about service continuity. Backward compatibility means that we always have to implement what was done before, whereas can't find new solutions to actually serve the same service. Backward compatibility freezes your implementation of the service. We have done service continuity over the years with 3GPP, so voice has always been supported, but through different implementations. We're making sure that the services that are important for automotive, especially the safety services, the ones that are saving life, can be then transitioned over the different generations of radio technologies that are coming up in the next decade or even in the next 20 years.
Service continuity over backward compatibility. It's a small semantic shift, but it unlocks a fundamentally different approach to innovation. Keep that idea in mind because it connects directly to how the broader ecosystem is being rewired. Back to my conversation with Tanief Shat. Once he had set the baseline, software-defined is simply the car now, he laid out 4 possible scenarios for how the industry might reorganize.
There's some scenarios we could think about. Could be one where the OEMs largely could preserve their dominance by partnering. So capabilities that they are not able to build up. So the other one could be there's more a balance of power. So there's still OEMs, but there's tier 1s, tier 2s, and new tech players, a very balanced power approach. And so other one could, of course, then tier 1s would be able to capture a little bit more of the cake, define more architecture work. There could be a completely disruptive tech-driven scenario where you would really see that these tech players, the new entrants, they define how the car look, they define the architecture, and then all these traditional tier 1s and maybe even the OEMs, they would just become commodities. Just produce, you do not define anymore.
Why do you think that this could happen? Is it just a question of the willingness of those tech actors to be more dominant, or do you think that this is based on the use cases and the demand from the consumers?
It depends a little bit on the region. In Europe, the most value add in Europe we could create is if the OEMs would still remain to be like dominant, but they need to partner. For China, clearly this is probably most disruptive. This is clearly tech driven. Whereas for the US, we believe more in like a balance of power tech players, but there's also like the traditional world, and this will continue to coexist, but it's a different market. Depends a little bit on the region, how these ecosystems will form. There will be new ecosystems that are forming. Whenever something is in motion, then there's new kind of value pools that are forming. There's more and more electronics and software content coming into the car. So that's a growing market. Even if you sell like a constant number of cars globally, but you can have really double-digit growth when it just comes about software electronics content. Question is actually who will make this race and who will grab their fair share of it.
The Waymo example illustrates the extreme end. Maybe you have used one in San Francisco, and Tanyev put it bluntly.
As a car OEM, you are fully commoditized. Just the four wheels that brings you from A to B. All the rest, like the sensors, the full software, the training data, all value captured not by the OEM, it's captured by the tech player.
One of the most visible signs of the ecosystem shift is who is now talking directly to OEMs. A decade ago, a semiconductor company would rarely have a direct relationship with a car manufacturer. That has changed. Wei-Shi, you from MediaTek, explain why from both sides.
The importance of the silicon suppliers like you guys really increasing their importance in the supply chain. Why do you have more direct contact with the OEMs that you used to have in the past?
First of all, it's really driven by the customer side. So there are some natural disasters and also by such long supply chain with the OEM, with the tier 1, tier 2, very complex supply chain. The car OEM, they want to secure to their customer, the end user, the smoothly delivery. They want to control the whole supply chain to make the short more effectively, more short. And the second aspect is the complexity in the telematic and the cockpit and even the ADAS increased dramatically. The car, the functionality will heavily rely on the semiconductor capability.
Semiconductor is taking more and more importance into the overall scheme of things.
Another aspect is about the ecosystem, talking the AI, the large language models. They are changing every day, every week. Some car maker want to develop their own differentiator apps based on the new AI modeling. This only be possible if they are talking more effectively directly with the semiconductor partners. This is already where from the semiconductor areas, we are working with the OEM, we are working with the tier 1, depends on the car maker's strategy, philosophy.
Andrew Thiel from Trustonic offered a different angle on the same shift. His company provides a hardware-backed security, the kind of deep platform capability that used to be buried in the supply chain. Now, OEMs are asking for it by name.
A few years ago, we would have been talking about the supply chain. Now we talk about the ecosystem, and that's a measure of how rapidly things are starting to change. With the number of challenges from connectivity to software-defined vehicles to AI to the back-end cloud systems. These are big, major strategic investments. It is driving collaboration, but it's also driving a recognition that innovation and inspiration can come from anywhere. To harness that, you have to be more open. Security in automotive used to be through isolation. Different network buses did not talk to each other. CAN codes were unique to every OEM and typically every model line. If I was a third party and I wanted to help you as an OEM, it was incredibly complex. Now, particularly with SDVs, that it's moving towards the idea of common APIs, common policy management strategies, common building blocks, both at the hardware and the software level. And that allows 6 months before you launch, you can still accommodate new concepts because you have that open architecture. And we've seen over the last year, major OEMs like Stellantis and Toyota joining and coming together and being very open about their needs. It's a big mindset shift.
So if the ecosystem is becoming more open and more collaborative, a natural question follows: who orchestrates all of this? I had two conversations that offered very different but surprisingly complementary answers. Charlie Isaacs is a CTO at Salesforce, and he told me a story that goes back to 2019 when Salesforce and Harman first connected a vehicle head unit to a back-end CRM system.
We were in a brainstorming session with our good customer, Harman. Salespeople drive a lot. Why not connect that salesperson and their own back-end in Salesforce to the vehicle. So within a matter of hours, we were able to connect their speech-to-text engine into our platform. Full power of Salesforce became available for that salesperson driving in the vehicle.
From there, it evolved. The next prototype with Qualcomm tackled service, a check engine light that automatically creates a trouble ticket, schedules a technician, and notifies the dealer as the car approaches. But what Charlie described next is where the ecosystem logic gets really interesting.
Think of it as a large orchestration system. Different verticals within the industry are going to build their own agents and large language models. Let's say I'm a parts company. I have the world's best agent in finding the cheapest price for my parts. That doesn't do anybody any good if nobody can access that. So if they register that up with a system like MuleSoft Fabric, anybody that's connected to that MuleSoft Fabric has an unfair advantage over anybody else that isn't connected to that.
And from the voice AI side, Andrew Richards at SoundHound AI was describing a strikingly similar logic, but from inside the car.
So our position has evolved. We've always been up against big tech companies, Apple, Google, Meta. But I think what's evolved is more of an opportunity for us to work together. Even Apple is opening things up now so that you can say, hey, ask my car to ask Apple to do this. We're essentially saying, I'll have my agent contact your agent, but as the user, you don't have the friction. SoundHound is a very unique position to orchestrate that. We can be the face or the voice of the car brand itself. We represent the brand. But then if we have to talk to Apple or Google or any other API or LLM, we can make that call through things like MCP, for example, and make it seamless with the driver. Calling different wake words can be a little bit clunky. It's in a really good position to help with that.
Two companies, very different origins, one enterprise CRM, one voice AI, both converging on the same insight. In this new ecosystem, value accrues to whoever connects the dots, the orchestrators. Now, all this ecosystem restructuring, all this collaboration, is this a pure B2B conversation? Where does the consumer actually benefit? Andrew Thiel was unequivocal.
Consumer is driven by experiences they have outside of the vehicle. Seeing that from the phone, the experiences of the phone leaping in to the vehicle. Microsoft Teams, for example, on your head unit. Google applications and services. But for a consumer, they don't want to understand the technologies. And they don't want to understand the life cycles and the timelines behind it. What they look at is a utility benefit. The more open the OEMs and the platforms become, it will drive more engagement with their brand. When we talk about this digital or monetization of digital services, that dreams start to become a reality because, again, you are giving a consumer the experience they want beyond just the basic driving experience.
And Andrew Richards from SoundHound AI talked about what used to go wrong.
I've lived through that. I've been frustrated by it. I've talked to my car and said, come on, that wasn't, It started with the introduction of LLMs. So we used to have a pretty high rate of, sorry, I don't understand. That's over. Recently, we launched with Stellantis real-time generative AI. In Europe, people love asking who scored the goal for Bayern Munich or whoever their favorite club is when they're traveling and can't watch the game. These things, they just didn't exist before, and we can essentially answer literally any question that a driver asks, and that's in production today.
If there was one message that cut across every conversation I had this week, it was about urgency.
Within the next 12 to 24 months, you need to build up more capabilities. If you don't have them, you will really have a really hard time to prevail in that game because then you are actually driven and not the driver. You're not in the driver's seat. And one of the most important capabilities, we have the capability to play in an ecosystem. It's not just a typical, like I'm the OEM and this is the supplier. That's typical procurement behavior. That's not working like this anymore. It's much more collaborative, much more partnership on eye level.
Software is eating the world and AI is eating the software. It's going to evolve into an agent-to-agent operation. So you're going to have your agent running in the vehicle, your orchestration layer, that's going to have to run in the cloud. The network speeds are improving. So everybody's talking about 6G here now, communicate via satellite. Anybody that's connected to that fabric has an unfair advantage.
Eventually, it will become seamless, whether it's a cellular connection or a SATCOM connection. We're not there yet. It's a process because similar to how it started with 3G and 4G coverage, the type of data that was available versus the type of information that you were able to share. Now we watch 4K videos without any hesitation. Eventually, I think SATCOM will get there too.
So here is what I'm taking away from Barcelona this year. First, non-terrestrial networks NTNs are real. They are not a future promise. BMW has a roadmap. Harman has a working product. MediaTek has the silicon. 5G AA has the standards framework. The pieces have clicked into place. And the companies that plan their connectivity strategy around terrestrial only are going to find themselves exposed in coverage gaps, literally and strategically. Second, the ecosystem has been written again. The old waterfall is gone. What's replacing it are networks of collaboration where semiconductor companies talk directly to OEMs, where voice AI companies orchestrate calls between competing tech giants, where a CRM platform becomes an automotive infrastructure player, and where security is no longer a black box, burying 3 layers deep in the supply chain. And third, this isn't something you can wait out. The window to build the capability to operate in this new ecosystem is 12 to 24 months. After that, as Taniev put it, you're not in the driver's seat anymore. I want to thank all 7 of my guests for their time and their insights on the floor in Barcelona. Taniev Schat from PwC Strategy and Maxime Flamand from the 5G Automotive Association, Firasat Siddiqui from Harman, Weishi Yu from MediaTek, Andrew Richards from SoundHound AI, Andrew Thiel from Trustonic, and Charlie Isaacs from Salesforce. Remember that behind every dashboard and every feature lies a human story, and those are the stories we are committed to uncovering here on Under the Hood. I'm Stéphane Lagrelle. Thanks for listening.